My father and stepmother wired 230,000 euros from the account I saved for 10 years to open a boutique. When I confronted them, my father sneered, "Thanks for your obedience. Your funds now fuel Julian's breakthrough." I couldn't stop laughing because the money they took was actually. My name is Marcus Brunner. I'm 37 years old, and I live in Vienna, in a one-room studio tucked above an old letterpress print shop on a side street near the Westbahnhof. The ceiling creaked in winter, and in summer the windows swelled and refused to shut right, but it was mine. My space. My silence. Most people don't know what it takes to save 230,000 euros when you work on mechanical watches for a living. I did it in 10 years, fixing vintage timepieces during the day at a quiet boutique downtown, and doing private restorations by candlelight at home after hours. I said no to dinners out, new coats, and everything in between. No vacations, no drinks with friends. I wore the same watch every day, a 1940 Zenith I'd rebuilt from a box of rusted parts. Every single cent went to one goal: opening my own shop. A proper horology boutique in the heart of Vienna's historic district, where time wouldn't just be sold, it would be resurrected. The idea kept me alive during years when I felt invisible, uninvited, especially by my own family. My father, Anton, was the kind of man who played the wise patriarch at dinner parties but kept a sharp tongue in private. After he remarried when I was 14, he stopped pretending I was part of his future. My stepmother, Katrin, always talked like she was doing me a favor just by remembering my name. "Invest smarter," she would say, with her usual cold smile. "Buy an apartment. Get into stocks. You think a storefront will pay off in this economy?" Whenever I tried to explain my vision, that it wasn't about flipping watches but preserving craftsmanship, she'd tilt her head and murmur, "That's very romantic, Marcus. But it's time to grow up." Julian, my half-brother, never had to grow up. He was 10 years younger, with the face of a movie star and the ego to match. He went to film school on family support, which apparently didn't extend to people like me. Julian didn't work. He collaborated. He didn't need money. It just showed up in his account every month. I once saw him drop a 3,000 euro camera lens in a canal and laugh like it was a party trick. Every time I saw them, for birthdays, for strained holidays at the estate near Salzburg, they asked the same question, just dressed in new clothes, still fixing old clocks. Julian would chuckle, "Bro, I'll put you in my movie. Like the guy who counts toothpicks in a casino or something." I smiled. I always smiled, because I had something none of them would ever understand: purpose. And I was finally close. The lease was being reviewed. The location was perfect, on a narrow cobbled street once walked by royal watchmakers. I had my brand name picked out, my logo designed, my tiny inventory of collector pieces ready to display. The boutique would open in spring, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was moving towards something that couldn't be taken away, something that ticked in my chest like a movement wound by hand, precise and undeniable, even if they couldn't see it, especially because they couldn't see it. 2 weeks after signing the initial paperwork for the boutique, I started noticing something strange at the shop. It began with a lag. The software I used to track restoration projects, an old but reliable database I'd customized myself, started freezing. At first, it was barely noticeable. A slight delay when switching between tabs. A glitchy flicker in the customer profiles. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I needed to update the drivers. Maybe it was the shop's Wi-Fi. But then the inventory software started acting up too. A Seiko chronograph from 1971 that I'd logged into the system disappeared from the digital shelf. My notes on a rare glacier restoration were suddenly corrupted. The files wouldn't open, just kept showing a blank page. I'd backed everything up on a separate drive, of course, but still, it didn't feel like a normal bug. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Katrin. "I heard you're opening soon," she said, her voice syrupy in that way that always made my stomach turn. "Must be exciting. How are you managing inventory?" My fingers froze on the keyboard. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing," she said lightly. "Just wondering how many clients you're taking on. You must have quite a bit of foot traffic already. Any trouble tracking? Transfers. Transfers. Not sales. Transfers." I glanced at the screen. The banking app was minimized in the corner, something I hadn't touched all day. "No," I said carefully. "No trouble." "Good," she said. "I'm just thinking ahead. Wouldn't want you to lose track of things. It's so easy for small business owners to get overwhelmed." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a full minute, just staring at the screen. How did she know about any of that? I hadn't posted updates. I hadn't mentioned anything about the boutique's payment systems. No one outside of Eliza, an old friend who helped me with branding, even knew what apps I was using. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was tired. That night, I stayed at the shop late, sifting through logs, checking for signs of corruption. But there was no malware alert, no warning flags, just subtle changes. A few files missing timestamps. Some user permissions altered in the system registry. I told myself I was imagining it, until I opened the task manager and saw a program I didn't recognize running in the background. It was named something generic, sys_monitor_util.exe. It wasn't part of my standard package. I ran a checksum. It didn't match anything I had installed. I hovered the mouse over it, trying to figure out what it was tracking. But every time I tried to expand the path, the window flickered, then closed itself. I stood up, heart pounding. Was it a virus? Or something worse? I shut the terminal down completely, yanked the backup drive from its dock, and shoved it into the small safe under the workbench. Then I locked the office and walked home through the quiet Vienna streets, my hands deep in my coat pockets, my eyes scanning shadows like they might answer the questions burning through my mind. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Katrin's voice, thinking of her words. Any trouble tracking transfers? No way. It couldn't be what I thought, right? But the sick feeling in my gut said otherwise. I woke up that morning with one thought in my head. This is the day. I was supposed to meet the building manager at 10 to finalize the boutique's lease. After a decade of grinding, scraping, and being told I was chasing a fantasy, I was going to sign my name on the dotted line and hang a brass plaque with my brand on it. Brunnersite. I even dressed for it. Not that anyone else would notice, but I did. Clean jeans, pressed shirt, my best boots. I didn't stop at the workshop. I didn't check the shop system. I told myself the weirdness could wait. Today was about the next chapter. The manager met me at the storefront, a narrow space tucked between an old print atelier and a cafe that sold nothing but rosewater pastries. We stood inside while he walked me through the final agreement, tapping the document with a pen. You can wire the transfer this week, he said. As soon as it hits the account, we'll schedule the build out. I nodded. Shouldn't take more than an hour. I took the tram back to my apartment. My hands were steady, but my chest buzzed with anticipation. The bank login window opened easily. The account numbers loaded, and then I froze. The balance was wrong, not slightly wrong, not a few €100 off. The account, my boutique fund, my life savings, the vault I had built piece by piece over 10 years, showed a balance of €716. I blinked, refreshed the page. Still €716.08. I clicked View Transactions. There was only one listed, a wire transfer outbound for the entire account. Every last cent processed 2 days ago. The recipient field just said, Clearing, external account. I stared at the screen, trying to breathe through the ringing in my ears. There had to be a mistake, a hack, a bank error. I clicked into the support chat window. The little bubble spun and spun. Nothing. I called the helpline. Busy. I opened the file drawer in my kitchen where I kept hard copies of every monthly statement. I checked the transfer form. My name, my digital signature, my login credentials. Everything looked legitimate, but I hadn't done it. I hadn't touched the account in weeks. My chest clenched. I shoved my phone into my pocket, grabbed my keys, and ran out of the flat, barely locking the door behind me. I drove 5 hours without stopping. The family estate sat quiet and smug behind iron gates outside Salzburg. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the roundabout. The same fountain burbled lazily in the center, the one I nearly drowned in at age 10. I parked, breathing like I'd just run a marathon, and walked up the steps. The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything smelled like lemon polish and old wood. Nothing had changed. Not a single piece of furniture out of place. I found them in the drawing room. Katrin was lounging in her usual spot, a velvet chair by the fireplace, sipping something clear from a crystal glass. My father sat nearby with a cigar unlit in his hand, legs crossed, expression unreadable. Julian was there too, reclined on the leather couch, idly scrolling through his phone. They all looked up at me as if I just wandered in from a different planet. Marcus, Katrin said smoothly. You're early. I'm not here for a visit, I snapped. Where is it? My father raised an eyebrow. Where is what? My money, I said, the words sharp in my mouth. The boutique fund. It's gone. The entire thing transferred out of my account 2 days ago. A pause. Then Katrin tilted her head. Oh, that. My jaw tightened. You have 30 seconds to explain before I call the police. Julian let out a low whistle, still not looking up from his phone. Wow, intense. Katrin stood slowly, walked over to the drinks cabinet, and poured herself more vodka. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She took a sip. It was a family decision. I blinked. What? My father finally spoke. You've been hoarding money for years under the guise of some artisan dream. That account. You never would have touched it if the boutique failed. It would have sat there, wasted. This way, it serves the family. Julian smirked. And my film is kind of your legacy too, isn't it? I stared at him. You used my money for that? It's not just a film, Katrin said quickly. It's a project with investors, connections. It'll elevate the Brunner name. People will take us seriously again. And Julian, I will ruin all of you, I said quietly, my voice flat and shaking. My father chuckled. You won't, because you're still thinking like a son. That stopped me. What? You still believe there are rules, he said, his voice low, that we respect lines. But Marcus, this family never operated on rules. We operate on leverage. Something cold uncoiled inside me. They didn't just take my money. They planned it. They planned it for months, maybe years. Katrin raised her glass. You're welcome to stay for dinner, but I'd advise you calm down first. I stared at all three of them. Then, to my own surprise, I laughed, not out of madness, out of something deeper, out of realization. They thought I was broken, but all they did was confirm what I'd always suspected. I was never part of them. I turned, walked out, and let the door slam behind me. And as I stepped back into the Salzburg cold, All I could think about was that moment of silence after my laugh, how it hung in the air, like the tick of a second hand before the next beat. I drove through the night, didn't stop, didn't speak. I just listened to the steady hum of the tires and let my thoughts fall into rhythm with the white lines flickering past in the dark. By the time I pulled into Vienna again, the streets were empty and the sky had just begun to lighten with the weak blue haze of morning. I parked outside the boutique's future location, the one I was supposed to sign for. I sat there in the car, staring at the shuttered windows, imagining the sign I would have hung above the door. Brunnersite. Now it was just another shop with no tenant. Later that day, I did what I never thought I would. I went back to the family estate, not to beg, not to talk, to confirm. When I arrived, the housekeeper let me in with her usual tight-lipped nod. The drawing room looked like it always did, pristine, preserved, and utterly artificial. Katrin was seated by the fireplace again, flipping through a glossy interior design magazine. My father stood near the bar cart, refilling a decanter. Julian was barefoot on the couch, typing something into a silver laptop. I didn't sit. Say it, I said. They all turned toward me. Say what? Katrin asked, her voice too casual. That you stole my money. Julian looked up, finally. Stole is dramatic, Marcus. Katrin sipped her drink. We used family resources. That's not theft. That's redistribution. My father nodded, as if she had just quoted a line from scripture. The Brunner legacy doesn't belong to one person. That account wasn't private. It was part of the broader picture. It was in my name. Your name doesn't mean what you think it does, he said. It's our name. There it was. Clean. Final. Julian stood, stretching with exaggerated effort, like the conversation bored him. You don't get it, man. This film, it's going to open doors. I'm talking international festivals, streaming deals. It's about more than you soldering gears in the dark. Katrin nodded. We've supported you for years. You ridiculed me, and you still kept coming around, she said, not even blinking. That means you trusted us. And in a way, this shows that you still do. I stared at her. You think I trusted you? You gave us access, she said with a shrug. You used shared software. Your systems weren't locked down. You assumed we wouldn't look. My mouth went dry. You had access to my system. She didn't deny it. You left the door open. Julian laughed. And you really thought the watch shop thing was going to work? You were building a museum, not a business. I looked at my father. Did you authorize this? He gave a thin smile. I encouraged it. Then he stepped forward, calm, composed. Thank you, Marcus. Truly, your obedience, your savings, they fueled something meaningful. That's all we ever hoped for. That one of our sons would contribute. The room went quiet. I looked at him, at Katrin, at Julian, who was now grinning like a schoolboy who just outmaneuvered the teacher, and something inside me shifted. I felt it click into place, like a spring finally snapping free in a rusted mechanism. I laughed, softly at first, then louder, sharp, and clean. Not from hysteria, but clarity. A cold, biting clarity that warmed me more than any fire in that room ever could. They all watched me, puzzled. Katrin furrowed her brow. What's so funny? But I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out again. Because in that moment, in that very breath, I realized something vital. They thought they had one. They thought they'd taken everything. But they didn't know the whole story. Not yet. And the part they didn't know? That was going to destroy them. I didn't go home. I went to Eliza's. She lived in a fourth-floor walk-up above a vinyl record shop in the 7th District, the kind of place that always smelled like eucalyptus and linseed oil. Her walls were covered in prints from old Czech movie posters, and her furniture was a mix of repurposed wood and mismatched thrift finds. Every corner of her space had a lived-in honesty I had always admired. She opened the door in a black hoodie, paint on her fingertips. I knew you'd come eventually, she said. You look like hell. I need your help, I said simply. She stepped aside. Then get in. I hadn't seen Eliza in months, but she didn't ask questions. She brewed a pot of coffee while I sat at her table, eyes fixed on a tiny crack in the ceramic tile. The words came out like splinters. My family emptied my account, used my credentials, called it a family resource. Eliza didn't flinch. She poured the coffee and sat across from me. You think they did it themselves? Or hired someone? Or installed something? I rubbed my eyes. Something's been off with my workstation. Lag. Weird back-end programs. Katrin made a comment about transfers before it happened. Eliza nodded slowly, already reaching for her laptop. Let's start from the beginning. I handed her a backup of my system, encrypted on an old SSD drive I never brought online. She hooked it up, fingers flying across the keyboard. I watched the code fly by. Strings of registry keys, hidden folders, logs I hadn't known existed. Jesus, she muttered after a while. This wasn't sloppy. This was intentional. What is it? There's a remote access tool buried in your OS. Light footprint. Custom name process. It wouldn't trigger anything unless you were specifically looking for it. She turned the screen toward me. A timestamped log appeared. Access records dating back over 3 months. External IPs pinging the system, most of them routed through obscure VPNs. And then, one entry that made my stomach turn. A local connection. From the estate. Eliza, I said quietly, can they spoof me? She nodded grimly. They already did. We dug deeper. The more we peeled back, the worse it got. My bank credentials had been used through a cloned login environment, a perfect replica of the original, triggered from my own machine. They had used my fingerprint data, likely from my personal USB scanner. Transactions were masked, permissions altered, logs rewritten. Every breadcrumb led back to a digital paper trail that pointed not at them, but at me. They're setting me up, I whispered. A money mule. Eliza didn't respond for a second. Then she looked up. Marcus, this wasn't just a smash and grab. I nodded slowly. This was a laundering funnel. She pulled up a web of interconnected shell companies, LLCs and consulting firms with no websites, no reviews, no presence. Most registered in Hungary, Slovakia, Luxembourg. Some had my name on the ownership docs. Others used email addresses eerily similar to mine. We traced the stolen funds. They hadn't gone to Julian's film account, not directly. They were funneled into a production studio based in Graz, then immediately bounced to 2 other companies listed as creative service vendors. Every step made me feel sicker. Eliza leaned back, cracking her knuckles. They used you to clean their money. The account they drained, it was part of a cycle. Move capital, mask the source, push it through your name, then disappear. And if anyone looks, I said, voice hollow, I'm the guy holding the bag. She nodded. They didn't just steal your life savings. They made you the fall guy. I sat there in silence, the full weight of it sinking into my bones. Not just betrayal, not just theft, but premeditated destruction. A long beat passed. Then Eliza said, quietly, you said they laughed when you confronted them? Yeah, good, she said. That means they don't know what you know now. She turned her screen back to herself, eyes flashing with purpose. Let's burn them to the ground. The days after Eliza cracked open the system were a blur. We didn't sleep much. Her flat turned into a digital war room, cables everywhere, 2 laptops running side by side, post-its tacked across the wall like a true crime storyboard. But even with the evidence laid out, something still felt off. Like there was a missing gear in the machine, a piece I couldn't name, until I remembered something. A feeling. 6 weeks before the boutique lease, I had this itch. Couldn't sleep. I kept waking up in the middle of the night with the same anxiety I used to get as a teenager when I forgot to lock the bike rack. That kind of irrational, but insistent paranoia. So one Sunday, without telling anyone, I took a train to Styria. A 2-hour ride, quiet and anonymous. There was a small cooperative bank near Leoben I'd used years ago for a side project. No online interface, paper ledgers, the kind of place people forgot existed. That day, I opened a new account in person. I transferred the real savings, the full 230,000 euros, into it using physical authorization, bypassing all my usual terminals. I even closed the online access completely and set a withdrawal hold unless approved in person. I told myself it was just a precaution, a ridiculous one, but it wasn't ridiculous. It saved me. I told Eliza about it the next evening. She blinked once, then smiled like a proud parent watching a kid pull a fire alarm before the smoke. So the account they drained was a decoy, I said. I left just enough in it to look full, enough to tempt anyone watching. Eliza leaned back in her chair, letting out a soft, disbelieving laugh. You set the trap before you even knew it was a trap. I didn't trust them, I said. Not completely. Not ever. She pulled up the digital ledger of the drained boutique fund, I scanning the outgoing transfers again. Then what they stole, she said slowly, wasn't your money. No, it was their own. We stared at each other. The realization bloomed between us like ink and water. Everything they did, the laundering scheme, the fake shell companies, the identity spoofing, they used my name, but their capital, dirty money, moved into a bait account under my credentials, thinking they'd offload it and pin it all on me if things went sideways. Except that account wasn't what they thought it was. They didn't drain my fortune. They walked straight into their own trap. Eliza stood and started pacing. You know what this means? The wire logs, the access footprints, the forged IDs, it all points back to them. The money they used to implicate you is traceable. You never moved it. They did. And I have the logs to prove it. Jesus, she whispered, spinning back toward me. Marcus, your laugh. That day at the estate. You didn't know it then, but I was already winning. They thought they stole my future, but they pulled the rug out from under their own feet. They robbed a decoy account, using tactics that tied them to a larger digital conspiracy. And they did it with just enough arrogance to think I'd never notice, that I'd fold, that I'd break. But I didn't, because what they never understood, what they never respected, was that while they inherited power, I built mine by hand, gear by gear, second by second. Now, I finally had time on my side, and their time was almost up. For the first time in weeks, I slept, not much, but enough to clear my head and stop waking up in a cold sweat. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew exactly what had to be done. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about getting the money back. It was about turning the lock, because I had the key now, and I wasn't keeping the door closed. Eliza and I sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by printouts, laptops, and a whiteboard she'd dragged in from her old art studio. Every wire transfer was tracked, every shell company mapped, every forged digital signature marked with a red slash. We need someone who understands how deep this goes, I said. I have someone, Eliza replied. An ethics lawyer, not the corporate kind, someone who's actually helped people out of financial abuse situations. We met her the next afternoon. Claudia Refeld, mid-40s, no nonsense, hair in a tight bun, phone always buzzing in her bag. She listened to us for 20 minutes straight, didn't interrupt once, then opened her leather portfolio and pulled out a checklist. You're going to need a second set of eyes. a forensic accountant, and you'll want to file a whistleblower report before they try to flip the script on you. She recommended a contact at the Austrian Financial Intelligence Unit, a former investigator turned consultant named Gregor. 2 days later, we met him at a neutral office in Nuba. No signs, no windows, just a hallway and a locked door. We laid everything out. Logs, screenshots, timestamps, copies of every document we could recover, plus the key detail. The account was a decoy. The money that disappeared wasn't mine. It was theirs. Gregor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. This isn't just identity theft. This is cross-border fraud, money laundering, wire fraud. And if these accounts are connected to other targets, we might be looking at a criminal network. I swallowed. Will the agencies take it seriously? They already are, he said, tapping the stack of evidence. This scope justifies full federal review. And because your name's on the shell companies, you'll need to make a statement before someone else tries to. We worked around the clock that week. Every trace of system infiltration had to be documented. Eliza organized the evidence into a timeline. Claudia handled legal filings and advised me on how to preempt any backlash. We found things we didn't expect. A list of email addresses registered using my ID but hosted through dark web relays. At least one of the shell companies had previously moved money from an elderly woman's foundation, cleaned and repackaged under a fake production house, same as Julian's. These people aren't just greedy, Claudia said. They're predators. And I realized then, it had never been about the boutique. Not to them. It was about control. It was about power. Julian's film wasn't the dream. It was the cover. And I had been the fall guy, handpicked for the role because I was the obedient one, the quiet one, the disposable one. Not anymore. By the end of the month, we had everything we needed. The forensic audit, the criminal complaints, the timeline of access and alterations, the full list of manipulated accounts. Claudia submitted the case to the Austrian Financial Crimes Unit and coordinated with the EU's Digital Identity Task Force. The response was swift. They're opening an inquiry into multiple Brunner-registered ventures, she told me one evening. And Interpol's cybercrime division wants a copy of your logs. Eliza looked up from her laptop. We just hit critical mass. The evidence was no longer a pile of suspicion. It was a net with names, timestamps, intent, and I had stopped being the victim. I was the whistleblower now, the witness, the spark, the one they underestimated, and the one who would bring it all down. The morning of the sting was cold and colorless, that kind of pale Austrian gray that makes everything feel like it's been dusted in ash. Eliza and I waited in a rented van parked 3 blocks from the so-called studio in Leopoldstadt. It was a narrow 3-story building wedged between a Pilates gym and an imported rug store, plastered with film posters and a cheap banner that read, Brunner Media Group presents, a new vision in cinema. It was a lie, of course. The building wasn't a studio. It was a front. According to the forensics team, no permits had been pulled, no payroll, no vendors, no actual film crew, just a digital address for bouncing money and an office filled with fake invoices and burner laptops. That morning, Austrian federal agents converged on it from all sides. No sirens, no shouting, just dark jackets and smooth coordination. From where we sat, I could see the front door swing open. Then, figures, hands up, pulled aside, a few words exchanged. And just like that, it was done. The operation that had siphoned hundreds of thousands and laundered capital under the Brunner name was raided and shut down in under 15 minutes. I exhaled. Next came the press release, not from me, not from anyone in the family, but from the Federal Bureau itself. Investigation into multi-entity financial fraud and cyber exploitation, involving members of a prominent Austrian family. They didn't print our name directly, not yet, but everyone in Vienna who followed business, politics, or society knew exactly who they meant. Later that evening, I got a call from Claudia. They've taken your father in for questioning. Katrin too. Julian was arrested at his co-working space trying to wipe a laptop. He threw a matcha latte at the investigator. Eliza burst out laughing. I didn't, because the next day, Julian went online. He posted a statement on his creative director page, dripping with faux sincerity, deeply saddened by recent events. I had no idea about the extent of what was going on behind the scenes. I was misled, betrayed by people I trusted. My half-brother, Marcus, has been struggling for years, and I can only imagine the resentment he must feel. Underneath it, hundreds of comments. Some sympathetic, some skeptical. One stood out to me. Wait, wasn't this guy always bragging about how his family funded everything? Another. This aged like milk. I didn't comment, didn't post, didn't reply, because I didn't have to. The investigators were in control now, and the evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Still, the smear attempts came. One of Julian's friends leaked old photos of me, hunched over a workbench, eyes bloodshot, fingers stained with grease, trying to paint me as unstable, obsessive. There were whispers in a few forums that I'd hacked my own account for attention, that I was jealous of Julian's success. But the noise didn't last, because the documents we submitted were real, because the access logs didn't lie, because forensic audits don't care about family politics, and because deep down, even their friends knew, Julian wasn't the type to build. He was the type to burn. My father went quiet. No statements, no phone calls, Just a headline in Die Presse 2 weeks later. High-profile Brunner Enterprises under federal review for corporate fraud. The article included a blurry photo of him in a coat and scarf, being led out of the courthouse. No smile, no cigar, no control. Katrin's scream had apparently echoed through the entire floor when they seized her phone. And just like that, the house of glass cracked, not with an explosion, but with a whisper. A quiet collapse, one lie at a time. It's strange how quiet the world gets when the noise stops coming from your own family. No more middle-of-the-night phone calls. No more thinly veiled check-ins that end in guilt. No more being spoken to like a child asking to borrow the car. Just silence and peace. 3 months passed. The investigation took over everything. The case made national headlines. Not front-page scandal, but steady, serious coverage. Terms like financial conspiracy, cyber laundering, and multi-entity fraud attached themselves to the Brunner name like rust on a gear. My father and Katrin were indicted on multiple counts: identity theft, embezzlement, unauthorized data access, fraudulent investment schemes. Julian got hit with fewer charges, but enough to shatter whatever public image he thought he had. Streaming companies pulled out. His film was exposed as a funding loop with no actual content. No script, no crew, just invoices to nowhere. When the formal statement from the Financial Crimes Division came out, it included a name at the very bottom. Information provided by independent whistleblower Marcus Brunner. I never imagined I'd see my name attached to something like that. But I wasn't ashamed. I was free. With the legal cloud lifted and my name cleared, I did what I should have done years ago. I left Vienna, not because I was running, but because I was finally walking toward something. I bought a modest workshop with an attached flat in Graz, near the southern edge of the old quarter. Nothing flashy. No storefront windows or branding. Just a matte black door with a brass handle and a tiny wooden placard that read, Brunner Zeitwerk, handcrafted timepieces. No tagline, no slogan, just truth. Inside, it was just me, my tools, and a bench lit by natural morning light. I spent my days restoring vintage movements, machining new gears from scratch, and working on my own line of handcrafted watches. No automation, no sales team, just quiet craftsmanship. Some days, I didn't speak to a soul until evening, and I liked it that way. I still check the headlines now and then. I watched as the Brunner name, once whispered in elite circles, became a warning, a lesson, but I didn't speak about them. I didn't answer calls from their lawyers. I didn't attend the court hearings. I had no interest in watching them fall. I was too busy building something new. Every evening, I closed the shutters on the shop, wiped down my tools, and made tea in the kitchenette that overlooked a sloping street. I watched the lights come on in the homes across the road, lives moving forward, quietly, the way I liked. Sometimes Eliza would visit. She brought pastries from a local bakery and helped with design layouts. We didn't talk much about the past anymore, because the future felt louder, cleaner, mine. I'd lost everything once, or so I thought. But now, in this tiny shop on a street no one knew, I was finally rich in the only currency that mattered. Time. Time spent well. Time spent honestly. Time spent under no one's thumb. And that, to me, was the real legacy. It was a quiet Wednesday when the letter came. No markings on the envelope. No return address. Just my name written in careful cursive. Real ink. Real paper. I opened it over breakfast, a slice of rye toast balanced in one hand, the kettle still whistling behind me. Inside was a single page. No introduction. No unnecessary words. Just this. Mr. Brunner, you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. I was one of the people caught in the schemes your family operated. My husband and I lost our retirement savings to a consultancy run through one of their shell companies. I thought we'd never get justice, or even be heard. You gave us that. Your courage changed the course of more than just your own life. It changed ours, too. Thank you for doing what so many people are too afraid to do. With respect, Margaret S. I sat down at the workbench, the toast forgotten. I read the letter twice, then a third time, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something warm unfurl inside my chest. Not pride, not revenge, not even relief, just clarity. I had done the right thing, even if it cost me everything I thought I needed, even if it hurt. That night, Eliza came by. She brought lentil soup and a small cactus in a chipped pot. You need something green in here, she said, setting it on the windowsill. We ate on the floor, backs against the wall, her hair pulled up in a messy knot. We didn't talk about the letter, though I had left it open on the bench. She saw it, read it, smiled, but didn't say a word, because she didn't have to. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a rhythm. I finished the prototype for my first original watch, a hand-engraved dial, brushed titanium casing, exposed movement. I didn't name it after my family. I named it after time itself. Ehrlich. Honest. Orders trickled in from collectors. A few restoration clients followed me from Vienna, but I kept it small, purposeful, the way I always wanted. Sometimes, late at night, I'd still think about my father's last words to me in that drawing room. Your funds now fuel something meaningful. And he was right. They did. Just not the way he imagined. His mistake, all of their mistakes, became the foundation for something real, something lasting, something I didn't need permission to build. One evening, I locked up early. The last piece of brass had been pressed into place. The final watch of the week was ready for shipping. I turned off the lights, grabbed my coat, and stepped into the quiet garage street. The little bell above the door chimed as I closed it behind me. Not loud, not flashy, just enough to echo into the night. A sound that, to me, meant everything. Closure and beginning.